Welcome to the 49th Annual Prix de West Invitational Art Exhibition and Sale. Here to begin today's program is the Curator of Ethnology for the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, Dr. Eric Singleton.
Howdy. Good morning, and thank you for joining us for our second day of seminars. I'd first like to thank our sponsors, shown on the screen. The museum is able to provide quality education and experiences because of these organizations and individuals. For those interested in taking home a memento from opening weekend, please visit the museum store located near the front of the entry. There you will find commemorative Prix de West bolos and catalogs, and you can check out the museum store's trunk show. The museum store will remain open until 4 o'clock today. We have another outstanding presentation this morning, followed by the highly anticipated Prix de West Award announcements at noon. We invite you to stay with us as these presentations awards directly following our lunch break. And now for our morning seminar, we are fortunate to hear from Prix de West artists Bill Anton and Randal Dutra. Here to begin our introductions, please welcome Prix de West artist Matt Smith.
Good morning, everybody. Trust your weekend is off to a great start. They say it might rain. I'd like to start by saying it's really nice to see so many familiar faces again. It's been too long. A year and a half is just too much time. And I know most of the folks out here, so that makes it even better. As you know, it's customary for a Prix de West winner to give a presentation or a speech at the following year's show. And last year was Bill Anton. Congratulations, Bill. So engaging Bill in conversation this morning is a very good friend of mine, Randy Dutra. And I don't know if you all know the depth of Randy's work and his history, but I'm hoping someday they'll allow him to do a presentation up here on his own. You in for that, Randy? Like many of the artists in the show, Randy exhibited an interest in drawing at a very early age. He had a fascination with animal life, animal anatomy, their movement, their character, and so that often became the subject matter of his work. He also had a fascination with animation and special effects in the television programs and movies of his time. And that led him to fashion little creatures out of clay and do his own stop-motion films. His interest in both the drawing and art and the film continued through grade school and into high school. And at a very early age of 16, caught the attention of Clarence Tellenius, a Canadian artist who would hold gatherings at the Okanagan Game Farm in Canada. And all these artists would gather up there and observe, study, photograph, draw, paint, sculpt animals from direct observation. It was kind of a who's who of artists. And so that was instrumental in Randy's growth and where he would go from there. It was kind of his foundation. And some really great artists were there. I'm jealous that I wasn't involved in all that. Robert Lockheed, John Clymer, Ken Riley, Harley Brown. I mean, it was a list. Wayne Wolf, John and Terry Kelly Moyers. So these were relationships that he developed through that. After high school, he went to Art Students League in New York City, where he continued his studies. And when that was finished, he went back to the Bay Area, his home in the Bay Area, and took a position in a foundry where he learned foundry work from the ground up. His understanding of animal behavior and movement led to a job with a series of jobs in the film industry, including Star Wars, the second Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, as a creature designer and in the animation department. I don't know if you all know this about Randy. We all know him for his art, but he has a deep background. And that continued into a variety of other films, RoboCop, Gremlins, Willow, Jurassic Park 1 and 2, War of the Worlds. His work was so outstanding that he was hired as animation director for Jurassic Park 2 and War of the Worlds, both of which he got Academy Award nominations for. Pretty impressive. After he finished up with War of the Worlds, he decided to devote his time full-time to painting and sculpting, and we are the beneficiaries of that here at this show every year. Bill and Randy and I are very close friends. They're like brothers to me. We all share in the combined interest and understanding that to be the best artist you can be, you need to work from direct observation, go to the source. And they are both well connected in the natural world. I can't think anyone better to engage Bill in conversation, get him to open up about his thoughts on art and life than Mr. Randy Dutra. So it's my great honor to introduce Randal Dutra.
Good morning. I got to get used to sound level here. It's good to see you. How many times in this, during this weekend, have you heard people say to each other, "It's good to see you"? I've seen people shaking hands. I've seen people holding hands. I've seen people hugging. I've seen people kissing. This Prix de West has turned into a love fest. And let me say that art reminds us we have a soul, and art brings us together. So here we are, and hallelujah for that. I would like to take a moment and acknowledge some very important people in the audience, Ed and Vera Muno. Ed, as we all know, for years, for many, many years, was curator of the Prix de West show, now responsible for mounting the exhibition, and he has since retired and been a magnificent mentor to Miss Susan Patterson. He has handed the torch to Susan. Susan has taken up that torch and lit up the Prix de West galleries, and beautifully so. I want to thank them for their service to the museum and to the artists who entrust our works, our babies, our children, to their capable hands every year. Thank you so much. We love and appreciate you for that. I was visiting with a friend the other day, and the topic of friendship came up. And he said, friendship is great. It's non-fattening. It's been proven good for the mind, the body, and the soul. And he said the best part is, it's free. And I thought about that for a moment, and I said, you know, friendship isn't free. There's a price to friendship, and it has nothing to do with financial considerations, but everything to do with paying attention. Now, collectively, all here in our lives, stop and think about this. Step back. The things you value, that you cherish, that you love. I'll bet, I'll wager, I will guarantee that you're paying attention to those things in your life. I believe Bill Anton is absolutely of that same ilk. I've known Bill for, oh boy, going on 20 years, and there's people here that have known him longer. Our friendship has deepened and broadened. I'm a better person for knowing Bill. And I'm blessed to have him in my life. Now, I'm not sure he's going to feel the same after this seminar, but that's where it stands now. if I was given the impossible task to encapsulate Bill Anton in a single word, one word, to pack him into this word, that word would be, it'd be faith. Faith in God, faith in family, faith in friends, and somewhere down here, faith in art, the fine arts. Now, don't misunderstand me. Bill is as serious as any artist, fine artist, thoughtful artist that I know. Those are his priorities. And I respect and admire him for that. So let's get down to it. Please join me in welcoming to this stage my dear friend, my brother, the 2020 Prix de West Award winner, Mr. Bill Anton.
Thank you so much.
You ready for lunch?
Yeah,
Good,
let's
good.
go.
Okay.
I'm starving.
Well, anyone that knows Bill, too, knows he's got a wicked sense of humor. It's about as dry as a dry martini in the Death Valley. There was something that was life-changing that happened to you on a trip to Glacier when you were younger, and it was kind of an epiphany, as I understand it.
Yeah, it really was. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, but I remember about when in 1964 my folks started making noise about it and taking a trip west, and that whole summer I couldn't wait until we left. I didn't know what I was up for, or what I was in for, I should say, but we drove all through the night. I think we left in early August, and we were gone for about 3 weeks, and it was my two sisters and my mom and dad and I, and we drove through the night, so there wasn't much to look at going through the Midwest and things like that. But we drove into Glacier National Park in the middle of the night. Couldn't see anything. I was probably asleep in the back of the station wagon. And at 7 a.m. the next morning, I saw my dad out in the parking lot of the hotel we were staying at, and he was doing this to me. And I thought I was in trouble. And I walked over to him, and he said, "Look." And there were just these gigantic peaks all around, and I was absolutely awestruck, and I don't think I was really ever the same again. I spent the next 12 years, I was 7 years old at the time, I spent the next 12 years, I think, trying to figure out, how do I get back to this place? Because I cannot be in Chicago.
You know what's interesting about that, and we've had some discussions about this, is that there's some things that we recognize, but we don't have the experience to explain why we recognize these things. And it's like for me, it was like seeing an artist named Heinrich von Zugel, who's an incredible painter. And we've had discussions about that. You know, and I happen to have one on my wall, which is an amazing story.
I know you keep bringing that up.
I'll will it to you. So were there some works or certain artists that just like spoke to you even before you had that vocabulary, that visual vocabulary and experience?
You know, I can't put my finger on a specific artist. I had some, Remington prints or something in my bedroom when I was growing up, but I don't think it really dawned on me. I think as far as painting, I had some initial abilities as a little kid for drawing, so I was interested in it, and I seemed to have some sort of gift for that at an early age, but a lot of kids have that. But I had an interest in the West. I think my father was very interested in Western history. I always saw him reading about it. And then when I saw it, also at that very same time, my oldest sister, there's a pretty widespread age disparity in my family. My sister was married to a commercial artist when I was 7 years old too, so it was basically that same summer. And I got to see real ability close up for the first time. So that experience with already sort of a natural inclination for art, and then seeing the West hands-on, I think those things, excuse me, united at a very early age. And I just sort of knew, you know, somehow this has to come together. I don't know how or when, but I must say that the, you know, ranch life or things like that, it wasn't the initial impetus to get into this. It was the geography of the West that I saw first, because the people that were living out west and making a living off the land, that came later for me. I didn't really put those two together. First and foremost, it was the landscape that was just so unlike anything that I had ever seen before, and it just grabbed me by the throat at a very early age.
Now, important to all of us, I think pretty much without reservation of the artists here, is that mentorship. Mentors are everything. They speed the process. They open your eyes to things that you wouldn't have thought of before. And so I was just wondering, who are some of the formative mentors, you know, whether their work influenced you or whether you're able to study with them, you know, physically. Just what were some of the influences that, or some of the people that influenced your work and how you might see things?
I would say that there's three primary ones. When I began to really look at Western art seriously, James Reynolds just knocked me right off my feet. I'd never seen, you know, when you first get into this, you tend to gravitate towards maybe photographic imagery. But there was something about his work, even at that early stage, that I looked at and went, this is a level above. And there's something way beyond simply the subject matter going on in these pictures. And he was obviously an artist, and so Jim was very, very important to me. Then I was encouraged early on to work outside as much as I could. And there was a painter working in that field that was, you know, fairly well known at the time. I think we're now talking somewhere in the late 80s. But I saw his work in a magazine. His name was Michael Lynch. And I remember telling Peggy at the time, I opened up the article and I said, if this guy ever teaches, I've got to get around this guy. Well, as a lot of things happened in my life, just sort of fortuitous events, he was on the docket at Scottsdale Artist School, and I took from him in probably about 88 or something like that, and I locked eyeballs with that guy, and it was one of those moments where you just know something has fundamentally changed again for me. You know, we're kindred spirits. Mike is he's a Renaissance man, world-class virtuoso on the guitar, best painter I ever saw, builds his own furniture. He's just an extremely articulate, wonderful guy with an absolutely whacked out sense of humor. He's hilarious. And so I really gravitated towards that guy. And through Mike, then I met the great Ned Jacob.
Yeah.
And so Ned was hugely important to me because, you know, all my friends and we were going out and painting landscapes from life, plein air, and things like that too. And I always used that as a means to an end rather than an end in itself, because it was so difficult, and my early efforts outside were so awful. But there was, I remember saying to myself, if it's this hard, it's got to be valuable. So I just sort of stuck with it. But it dawned on me, you know, Matt and Skip and Dan Young and Ralph Oberg and all the guys that I was familiar with at that time were going out and getting work that was directly related to what they do, largely landscape. And the landscape was very important to me, so I continued to do that. But then it dawned on me, if I'm going to take the time to do this, I should be doing the figure from life. I mean, that's my act. That's what I'm supposed to be doing, and of course, it's the best way to get better is to stand in front of those things and heave to from life. And that was what Ned was all about. And he introduced me to painting the horse from life. And then I realized that a great deal of the body of his finished work was done on the spot, whether in Africa or Montana. And so I really took everything Ned had to say very, very seriously, as I did all the people that I got around. And so I started working from life with the figures. So those three guys, though, and Jim I got to visit with quite a little bit, sometimes privately, sometimes in a group with other artists. And he was just a very generous guy. Of the three of those guys, Mike Lynch was probably the easiest to be with because we were sort of a kindred spirit. Jim and Ned, the types of guys that didn't suffer fools.
I had that experience with Bob Lockheed.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Didn't I never cracked wise around them.
As you know, I spent some time with Bob Lockheed.
Yeah.
And
I envy you for that.
Well,
more than you know.
I mean, it came at the perfect time in my career, because what you really need at that time is you need a foundation. You need a solid foundation. And sometimes people ask me, well, how can you do this, do that, do this, do that?
Yeah.
And all of the artists I know have this in common, is that it comes from one well.
Right.
And that well is the foundation and the things that we've learned from other people.
Right.
And
timing is everything. I mean, you met that guy at a seminal point in your life where everything's firing and you're all jazzed up, and then you get to meet a guy like that. Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, the universe opens up to you.
And it truly does. I mean, it's a series of epiphanies as you meet these different people and your different point in your life. I know Ned was instrumental in working with you, or you working with him on horses. Mm-hmm. Now, anyone that's seen Bill Anton's work knows that it marries landscape, figure, and animal. And not just any animal, the horse, which, the anatomy is not hidden, such as like a grizzly bear, which has anatomy, but it's like looking at a horse. It's like looking at a greyhound. I mean, there's nowhere to run or hide. So, my hat's off to you for beautifully blending those three genres that each and of themselves is a life study in themselves. Yeah.
Well, I don't do any of them well, but I like to combine them.
I wasn't going to say that, but okay. And there's Bill's trademark self-effacement and generosity. There's things that I admire about artists, and a lot of it has to do with variety. The artists that I admire do a variety of subjects, but it's not that they just do different subjects. It's that it's informed variety. They do their homework. They study each of those things before they do a new exploration. And you certainly are a person who strikes me as that way. And what's probably a lot of you don't know, that Bill Anton is one of the best, wonderful seascape painters and marine painters I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of them. And what is it about seascape that, I mean, it's elemental. It's rock, it's water, it's sky. And so it allows you these amazing freedoms.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it allows you amazing freedom, and it's pure power and emotion when you're painting the ocean. And I think, too, and I have to be completely honest and practical about this, there's not all that much drawing involved. It's certainly not anatomical drawing. So it allows you to just rear back, load your brush, and let fly a little bit, And now, I got to say, I don't understand that much about the ocean. I haven't studied it, certainly like Frederick Waugh or anything like that, but there's a power and a rawness to it that allows you to just sort of explode onto the canvas, where with that's one of the reasons I admired Ned so much was that he was able to do that with the figure. And the landscape behind him, he could just slam into that thing because he was such a consummate draftsman that he understood those things so well and could articulate them and never lose any of the emotion, I should say, for the subject. So I'm not there yet. I don't know that I'll ever be. In fact, I'm real positive I won't be. Ned was one of a kind. He was one of the few guys that you could say that he could describe and interpret in the same line. I've never seen that before. Certainly Mike Lynch is like that with a road pattern and a brush, where it's just, I remember being in the back of one of his workshops, everybody's gathered around him, watching him paint, and he slammed in the Rio Grande Gorge in about 5 swipes, and you could hear people sucking wind, just going, "Why?" And it's that sort of a reaction when you see somebody that consummate work.
Yeah. Well, and another thing you've done too is you've taken that love of coastal work and again integrated it with your Western work. And Bill has done some amazing paintings of cowboys and horses, contemporary, on the coast.
Well, there's ranching all up and down the Western coast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
but I hadn't seen.
Seems like it
anybody do
married
that.
pretty well.
So.
And gave me an excuse to paint the ocean with a horse.
As you're going forward, are there certain things that you feel that you're seeing now that you didn't see before? I mean, it's like, I look back at when I was 20, and I'm not the person well, hopefully in some ways, I'm not the person I was when I was 20. I'm the person I am now. And so as we go through different stages in our paintings, where do you see yourself wanting to go and explore more? I mean, obviously refine, the horses and cowboys and what we know, but do you see yourself possibly doing more abstract work or interpretive more in a certain way, or do you?
I knew you were going to ask me something that I had absolutely no answer for.
Well, good.
Yeah.
This is what I'm after.
I'm not really sure whether it's more complexity in the pictures, or early on in your career, you're so sort of constrained by having to earn your chops, earn your spurs with a brush. Mm-hmm. And so brush mileage is really, really important. You just paint and paint and paint and paint and paint and learn as you go. And I've said this before, and I think some people maybe think, boy, that is really mercenary sounding. But if you can't early on figure out a way to keep doing this, then you'll never get the chance to get better. And all I ever wanted to do was get better, which means I had to stay in the game somehow. So you kind of did things that you knew you were able to pull off and would be marketable, so you would have some sustenance, excuse me, to keep going and learn more and get better and better and better. But as far as what the near future holds or anything like that, I would just say, try to get out of my comfort zone more, try to do more complex, maybe 20, 30 figures or something. I'm not real sure what that looks like. I'm not real sure, so you really caught me off guard.
Another thing that Bill
I can tell you this. I've never been interested in innovation as much as I've been interested in doing things better than I have in the past. Innovation for innovation's sake never moved me. I think that's what gave rise to abstract expressionism and a lot of that stuff, that you just go, oh, it's new, so it must be valid. And my mind doesn't work that way.
And we've had this conversation too, where some artists of the past are just. It just seems that history now is kind of a foregone conclusion with some younger generations coming up. And as we all know here, as I look around here, we pretty much know history is everything. We learn from history, we take it, we absorb it, and we add to it. And I was talking with Bill, and he goes, whenever I want to be humbled, I just open up some of my art books. And art books are like great teachers, especially for us. This is before the internet. Now you can just hit Google search for any artist you want to see. Right. And pretty much every artist I know has a certain library that they go to for inspiration. And you've always been very forthright about being humbled by artists of the past, and ones that Frank Tenney Johnson, these great artists that are in the galleries here that you can see originals.
Right, yeah. Well, you're right. And if you want to get better at what you do, there's only one thing that's going to kill that, and that's an ego. Mm-hmm. So if you want to get rid of your ego, go crack an art book and see what's gone on before you. And you'll get over yourself very, very quickly.
if your ego doesn't get in the way.
Just open that book and honestly evaluate. I think you have to really honestly evaluate where you are in comparison to the greats of the past. And once you do that, and you get a clear understanding of how great those guys were, and gals, then you no longer have a problem thinking that you don't have anything to learn because.
Well, and it's like the great writers. All the great writers I know are voracious readers. So they look and read everything, and then bring that into another quiver in their bow.
Right.
So it's I think understanding what has gone before and looking ahead and just finding ways of constantly challenging yourself. Some people come up to us sometimes and say, "Wow, you're brave. This subject you did is really brave of you." And And really, I mean, any artist can wax on about philosophically and go into all these things, but I think for Bill and I, we paint what moves us. We paint what keeps our interest. And that may mean genre hopping or different subjects, but I think curiosity is a huge part of what I see in you. You're curious about things, and that moves you to do things that I see something Bill has done. I mean, what I love seeing is the artists I know, and they surprise me. And I see Bill's work, and I see what he's done every year, and there's always something in there that surprises me. And I know music composers who say the same thing about other composers. I love in this passage, you surprised me here. Because that's getting into the real depth of creation and creativity, is when artists are surprised by their peers. It's a wonderful, and I've had that many times in front of your paintings.
Usually when somebody says to me, "Boy, you're really brave," it means, "Boy, you really missed the mark."
Yeah, it can be that too, but again, that's just something I really admire in different artists, and Steve Kestrel is a guy that I call Steve the alien, because I never know what he's going to do and where does this stuff come from.
Yeah.
I mean, this kind of creativity is so rare, and so it should be recognized, and that's what this show was so, I think, great about, is recognizing certain talents that maybe kind of step outside what we consider a genre, but they're really adding to it in such a personal way.
Well, just the ability to rub shoulders with people like Bill Reese and Steve Kestrel and, of course, George Carlson and yourself. And it's mind-boggling to me that I have that sort of access to these minds and these talents, because you can't overstate how important it is to be around people like that, that environment of creativity and sort of pushing the envelope, as you said. I've never pushed an envelope like Steve Kestrel has, and that's one of the many reasons that I admire him so much.
And I think also, too, this association with other artists is so important, because the thing that I think we try to do is, and it goes against human nature, is we try to get out of our comfort zone. Because when you get out of your comfort, like right now, I mean, we're sitting here on stage, there's something exciting about that, and there's something that pushes you to do something you haven't done before. And so artists getting out of their comfort zones is a must for me, and the artists I admire do that constantly. They find ways to push themselves, or avenues, or crevices, or chasms, or clefts in rocks that they're able to just draw out from that and bring something new to their work.
Yeah, you have to, I think, not be afraid to let people see you fail. Whether it's the stack of stuff that you've got in your studio, or whether, hopefully it isn't something that is just a rank failure that you bring to a show or something like that. That would that would be less than ideal. But certainly the letting people see that this process is not by rote. It is not a foregone conclusion when you step in front of the canvas, and that maybe the public will only see about 10% of what you're actually doing, because the work behind the scenes, or the studies, or the rabbit trails that you followed that didn't go anywhere and that you had to backtrack and find another avenue, things like that. So, but making yourself, I think, vulnerable. And, you can really see that in a demonstration sort of a situation where you're up on stage, and I've always felt like if you're doing a demo, be honest enough to give the people that are there watching you the understanding that the possibility of you failing up there is very high.
It's like a tight wire.
And that's a good thing. That's really a good thing, because when everything is doped out in advance, and you know exactly what you're going to do, and every decision is made for you, and you're just sort of filling in the blanks on stage, that doesn't help anybody. That just strokes your ego. But if you will allow somebody to watch you tackle something you've never done before, and you don't know if you can or not, I've done that several times, it gives them a better understanding of that this is a tough thing to do. And it brings them into the process of, I'm not sure exactly where this is going right now. Just stay with me, and I'll see if I can I can make some sense out of this. But these are the things that we go through.
Absolutely.
And the possibility of failure is extremely high. And it's like fishing. You just don't know if you're going to get one or not. And if you do know you're going to get one, why does anybody need to see that?
Yeah. And it's interesting as people walk through the galleries and look at the work. Really what you're seeing is you're seeing the tip of the iceberg of what the artist went through to do that piece. I mean, you shouldn't say, wow, that's a lot of work.
Because it's not a compliment.
Yeah, it's not a.
It's supposed to look easy, right?
Well, it's like the ballerina that that is over here and then does this leap like a feather over here. Well, what we don't see is the broken metatarsals. Right behind the curtain,
precisely.
Bleeding toes. I mean, and that's how it should be. It should be. What was that?
It ought to look like it was effortless, although it wasn't. The surface of a painting and the surface of a sculpture can often tell you the amount of
angst,
or virtuosity that is in every stroke, because it took a long time to get to where it looks like it's natural, although it may not have been, and the process may have been really bloody and messy and horrible. I used to compare it all the time to I used to play a lot of baseball, and it's like a great double play combination in baseball. If you've ever watched those guys working out before a game or something, they just make it look like it's the easiest thing. I got to tell you, it ain't. It's not easy to do that. You talk about broken knuckles and all of that stuff. But when you see somebody with that sort of fluidity, and it looks like it just came right out the end of your arm onto the brush and onto the canvas, now you're then viewing a real pro. They make it look easy, but the process to get there was not.
Well, what's interesting to me is when I see an original work of art, not a reproduction, is you see what's called scumbling, an artist laying paint over paint, not wet paint, which is wet into wet, but scumbling for certain effects. Tenny Johnson did it a lot with Carl Rungus.
Who?
Yeah. And I've come to the conclusion, because you can see areas where they've scraped something down completely, just scraped something down, laid another color area, color field, and then they'll wait for that to dry, maybe working on another painting, and then they'll come over and like drag a color over that. So it's a series of patinas that they're building up. And I'm convinced that the things we think, wow, how did they think of that? Man, they must have really been they must have been playing chess when they were
no kidding.
That. It's all because they're arriving at something. Not because they got it all figured out. They have a direction they're going.
Well, they're thinking all the time.
Yeah, but
they're
keeping their mind.
And that's a really interesting point, because if you're raised in the plein air genre like I was, where you are sort of taught to explode into the thing, and you've got basically 2 hours to get something down, then you have to juxtapose that with this sort of layered theory where you're scraping back, looking at that thing, coming over the top with something else. That has always been a very difficult line to walk with for me, because I've always found that the faster I am, the better I am if I just get it down and get it down fast. But are you getting everything out of the thing that you could by doing that? I'm not sure. I don't know. And so I'm in this constant fight. Do I look at these things as a layered, long, drawn-out process where you're thinking about them and no, that's not quite working, and getting back to raw canvas and staining it again and then building up layers? Or do you just slam into that thing with power and emotion? And that is always been that's probably the biggest struggle I have, is which way am I going to be going with that? I'm not sure. So, of course, I'm taking the middle ground. You know?
Well, one of the most daunting things, it's like a writer, sitting down to a blank page. I mean, a painter, you have this beautiful canvas that you can totally screw up, or it can be a masterpiece in somebody's hands. It's the same materials. And the thing that blows me away is painting. Okay, let's say painting essentially is a stick with hair on the end, colored mud, which is ground up earth or rocks for the paint, and cloth. That's painting. It hasn't changed in centuries. Yet look at Rembrandt. Look at Van Gogh. Look at Bill Anton. Look at these different painters. What
How about another example?
With the same materials. That's what makes painting so marvelous. And it's the same basic foundational materials.
Well, it's certainly the same tools.
Yeah.
But I'm always reminded of that story of the great A.J. Munnings, who is, if you haven't seen his work, the greatest horse painter in my mind that ever lived. And he tromped out into the woods to paint a landscape one time and got all the way out in the back country and realized he'd forgotten his brushes. So he found a bush, broke off some sticks, chewed the ends, frayed them like a brush, and then in others did the same thing and wrapped some cotton swabs or something that he had, or pieces of rag on the end of it, and painted this brilliant 1620 of a brook coming out of the woods. And so it ain't just the tools.
He wouldn't be denied.
Holy mackerel. Can you imagine? I mean, if I had my stuff, I couldn't have done it, let alone had to make your tools.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he had one eye.
Yeah.
He only had one eye.
It's true. He had one eye.
He had an accident as a kid.
He was saving a dog that was caught in a thicket, a willow thicket. And as he went to get the dog, it came up and slapped him in the eye, I don't know which one, and just completely obliterated his aqueous humor.
Yeah. So he had a couple of disadvantages.
Yeah.
On that particular occasion. And the painting is stunning. So it's not even so much the tools. It's the guy wielding them.
Now, I'm going to get a little personal here. Okay? Okay, we're going to unpack this a little.
Yeah.
Tell me what your wife, Peggy, means to you.
You were up here earlier, and you choked up a couple of times. So I shouldn't go there.
I know what that feels like.
Yeah, I know. I can't really go there except to say that when someone allows you the privilege of doing what's important to you and gives you the freedom to do that and the unconditional love,
that says it all. Bill, thank you.
Hello, good buddy. Thank you so much.
All right, we're going to, after this love fest again, we're going to open this up for questions. And I don't know, Bill, if you have anything more you wanted to say, or?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. Any questions? Does anyone have any questions for yes, sir. There's going to be a mic coming to you, so wait till you get the mic, please.
Could you give us the name of the artist you just spoke of who used the sticks for the paintbrush?
That's Sir Alfred Munnings.
Okay, never heard of the guy.
English painter.
An Englishman?
Probably gained most of his fame during painting the cavalry over in England, the Canadian cavalry when they came over to England in World War I. But he was the greatest equine painter I have ever seen. And I got the privilege of seeing, 50 or 60 originals when I went over to England a couple of years ago and went to his studio. But if you will Google him or whatever it takes, nobody, and largely worked these large canvases from life, sometimes with the royal family, horseback, just walking around him as he's working. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. And the thing about Munnings was that he could get just the right amount of musculature and detail, but never overworked, and always with that fluidity that is emblematic of a horse in motion. Just astounding stuff.
A great editor and great observer at the same time.
Oh, man.
Yes.
Bill, in researching my Warhol project, Seth Hopkins over here,
Hey, Seth.
I ran across a book called I Sold Andy Warhol Too Soon by Richard Polsky.
Yeah.
And, he talks about selling all this modern art throughout his whole career.
Yeah.
And towards the end of the book, after he realizes he sold his Warhol too soon and, left $1 million on the table or something, he, decides to buy one of your paintings to ease his pain. Essentially is the way it comes across. And I wondered how that relationship began and if it's continued and if he's been a fan of your work ever since.
Richard is a really interesting guy. Most of the folks that are sold out on that East Coast, and forgive me for generalizing too much, but the modern art scene, most of them don't really look at much of anything else. But I'll try to make this brief because it's sort of a long story, but Peggy and I started collecting some handmade mesquite furniture down at a little place in Tucson called Arroyo Design about 25 years ago. Well, I got to know the people who owned that place, and they loved art, so I traded them a few pieces for some of their exquisite furniture. Richard Polsky happened into that place in Tucson. I don't know what he was doing down there, but he happened in, saw the paintings on the wall, and he called me, and we just sort of started this friendship. But he's a very interesting guy because he's teachable. He was really, something about representational painting grabbed him, and he was honest enough with himself to say, wow, I've never really sort of been in contact with this sort of thing, and it sort of opened up a whole new world to him. So that's how that came about. I do see him occasionally. He's been to the house, and he's a wonderful guy. Very interested in sort of picking your brain about things, because it's a world different from the one that he was so involved in.
Hey, Bill, it's Ross. Randy gave you the chance to...
That sounds like Ross Madison.
Where
are you?
The great Ross
right
Madison.
here.
Oh, there. Okay.
Randy gave you the opportunity to give tribute to your wife, but I remember you talking about playing with your children at a time when you were supposed to be getting ready for a show, I believe. And I'm just curious what your fatherhood and your children have brought to your work, and the idea of playfulness in general.
Wow, what a great question. Peg and I had children fairly late in life. I think we were married 16 years before Annie Laurie came along. I had friends that I grew up with, and as we got to be in our 20s, and a couple of them would just always gravitate towards little kids. And I was sort of never that way until I had my own. And then I just went out of my mind. I never had so much fun in my life as when those kids were little. And I remember painting being way down on the list because I was always rolling around with them on the living room floor just having a blast. Everybody told me how much your life is going to change when children come along, and how much responsibility and work. and boy, things are not going to be, footloose and carefree the way they were before. The one thing they didn't tell me is how much fun it is to have little kids around, and what an honor to be able to, in a very seminal way, direct a little life back towards their Creator and show them what love looks like. As far as how it affected my work, Ross, I'm not really entirely sure. I don't feel like my work changed a great deal. The best questions are the ones that catch you off guard.
Well, and I'm going to say some of your greatest works of art are Will and Annie Laurie.
Well,
I've met
oh yeah,
Peggy's and Bill's children, and I'm engaging with Annie Laurie in the film stuff.
Right,
and they are the most thoughtful, respectful, wonderful children, and it's no accident.
Well, the Lord got a hold of them very early in their lives, and they had a tremendous example at home with their mother. So, and we just had so much joy being with them. And I don't think Peg and I would bat an eye if somebody said, well, you'd rather spend time with your kids than anybody else, and I still would.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And they're the beneficiaries of that.
I'm the beneficiary of that, yeah.
You need a mic up here, please? Bill, you want to do like maybe one more question?
Whatever you say, makes no difference to me.
Bill and Randy, one of the things that I've enjoyed about your talk is the acknowledgement that there are no shortcuts in getting from point A to point B.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about which I already know the answer to, but I'm curious about your thoughts with regard to the shortcuts that have infiltrated the art world these days a little bit.
I have to go.
And I got to self-medicate. So, no, it's a good question. Bill, take it away.
If none of you have heard Matt Smith talk about art, you're missing something, because he often talks about the fact that he has nothing between him and his subject matter when you're standing out in the field. The more stuff and steps that you have to put between you and what you're directly trying to describe on canvas or interpret on canvas, there's a diminishing of emotion, a diminishing of heart in your work. So the more mechanical means that are a part of that process, it diminishes it on all levels, and I think it sucks life out of your own soul, because you may as well just go sell shoes for a living if you're going to approach this incredibly beautiful world through the lens of a camera or from a mouse pad. Technology has it's served us so well in so many areas. That's one area where human abuse of that technology allows one to be completely unfamiliar with a brush and world famous as a painter.
Well, and I may add that, again, Matt Smith is probably, if anyone gets into Matt Smith's workshops or talks with Matt, everything this guy says is from experience and applicable. Let me tell you, Matt and I have had many discussions on the importance of the fundamentals. And the fascination for me is the different mentors I've had is all of them go over the same fundamentals, but in a very different way. So it keeps the fundamentals alive. And if something is wrong, and it was true in dance, it's true in painting, it's true in sculpture, it's true in music, if there's something not quite right, you can trace it back down to a fundamental that somehow got unwieldy and geometrically grew out of control.
Yeah.
So if you can look at a problem and reduce it to its fundamentals, you're 90% there to solving the problem. So that's why the fundamentals, I think, are so important.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to have a mentor that starts with the fundamentals. Before putting the window on the wall, you got to build the wall.
Yeah.
And Matt Smith is, in my estimation, one of the greatest teachers for that understanding.
I agree. And where's the passion? Where's the passion for what you're doing if you've got all that technology, that you've got to have all that rigmarole in front of you between you and what you're trying to do? I mean, can you get excited about, boy, you know, I've got this new app and it moves the tree to the other side of the canvas, and go out and look at it in the field and move it yourself and connect with what you're doing. It feeds your soul to do that, and it makes you passionate and charged up about slugging it out, because this is a slog. This is difficult stuff, and you've got to be really charged up about the subject matter to put yourself through that kind of agony. If you don't have that, everybody loses.
Yeah.
The work loses, you lose, your collectors lose. I don't get it.
Well, and here's the one thing I love about the show is you'll have certain collectors that buy certain artists' work. Well, immediately you have a kinship with that collector, because out of all the work in the show, they're looking at your work or someone else's work, and immediately you have this connection because you are having that same aesthetic experience. They're experiencing what you saw and how you did it. And I love that intimacy between a patron or collector and people that buy our works. I mean, creating the work is one thing, but having an audience that appreciates it and helps and supports us is everything. So thank you to them.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
Okay, one more question, and then we'll wrap it up.
All right, thanks. Bill, I'm a big fan. I hope to meet you someday.
Thank you.
You guys were talking about the importance of cracking open a good art book. And good art magazines will do the same thing. And I've got, I know more than one article on you, Bill. And the one I'm thinking of has a photograph of you on horseback. So I'm wondering, how much time do you spend writing and how that has affected your work?
A lot. Now, I would say that getting out on ranches has always been important to me, but I just don't get a chance to do it as much as I used to. But I did it a lot early on, and I probably ride about every other day. Just to clear my head, was it Jefferson that said there's nothing so good for the inside of a man as the outside of a horse? And that's really true. And really having a horrible day at the easel, and if you can get outside and clear your head, and if you're horseback, that really helps that. But you have to connect directly with your subject and get the feel of what it feels like to have, 1,200 pounds of solid muscle underneath you, knowing that he could kill you if he wants to, or running across a rattlesnake, or gosh, there's so many wonderful stories from ranches and experiences that I've had or just got to watch. Now, let's be clear. I am no cowboy, never have been. I don't cut the mustard in that regard. I was always just an observer. But I loved to ride, and you couldn't tire me. So that was the only advantage I had of being out there. I knew how to stay out of the way and things like that. But direct contact with the subject has always been really, really important, which is not to say that I don't use photos. I use them extensively. I've even set up some photo shoots and things like that. But the feel of being on a real working ranch with horses that are not tame, that are not pets like mine, and unexpected things that happen, or a day that doesn't go quite right, or things. It's really interesting to be, and I think vital to be involved in those things early on and get a sense and a flavor for it. I've always enjoyed my times outside. It just hasn't been as much as I'd like it to be. But also working, some of the best times I've ever had, Eric, outside at a ranch would be the day's work is done because, you know, it'll start at 4 a.m. or something like that, and all the cows will be back at the headquarters at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then they're going to brand or something like that. But I can then go and set up a little outdoor easel and paint a cow that's sitting down or laying down in a pasture, or maybe the foreman's favorite horse or something like that. And when the times when I can combine the two, riding and then actually working out on the spot from life, those are really precious to me.
Thank you. You've been a great audience, and enjoy the show.
Good.
Thank you for joining us for our morning seminar. We invite our Prix de West artists, premium package purchasers, society members, and sponsors to please stay and enjoy lunch here in the SEC. For all other guests, the Museum Grill is located outside the SEC doors and offers a variety of fresh salads, sandwiches, and wraps for you to enjoy. Please also take the opportunity to meet some of the Prix de West artists for a book signing right here in the SEC, beginning at 11:30 a.m. today. Enjoy your lunch. We'll see you back here at noon for the announcement of awards.